Oh, have I got a tale for you today. This man will never claim the title of hero, but a few of us truly know better. Stationed at Fort Wainwright, Alaska. It was the winter of 2002. We received yet another fire alarm on our panel at Bassett Army Community Hospital, the main post hospital where both God and Helen collectively delivered into my hands, literally, our precious daughter, Abigail Ann. Did I mention Abby was born there? We all collectively rolled our eyes at the thought of responding with lights and sirens all the way to the hospital, only to find that the panel just needed to be reset with a key and then try, and I do say try, to eventually go back to sleep. Anybody got more coffee? Soon after, the phone was ringing off the hook with phone calls, all coming from the hospital. As it turns out, a young high-speed E4 cracked a window to get some fresh frosty air during the day and forgot to completely latch it closed at the close of business. I'm certainly no math genius, but I can tell you that in the 3.5 hours from close of business to the time the alarm went off was the exact amount of time it took for the temperature to drop to 40 below zero and freeze the pipes in the ceiling above that office and throughout half of the third floor of the hospital. You guessed it, causing them to burst. My first clue came to me as I stepped off the elevator with our crew, including longtime Army firefighter vet and Mogadishu Fire Department alumni, John Pouch. John was a quiet guy who kept to himself most of the time, as was I. We had our reasons. So there we were, stepping off the elevator and immediately getting our boots wet. John looked at me and said, "This isn't good." We found the main office problem child there and eventually got through the door, and poor John got absolutely soaked right down to his flight suit, standing on top of a desk trying to get this pipe shut down. And did I mention it was freezing? I don't know how he did it, but John got the water pipe taken care of like a boss, using some kind of engineer branch ninja type stuff to give us that minor miracle. So there we both were, standing on top of this desk in the middle of an office in an Army hospital, soaked to the bone in sub-zero weather. The water leak had been taken care of, but now we had 12 inches of standing water on the ground and a window that we couldn't close. Why couldn't you just simply close the window, Ron? That's a really good question. For some reason, the chief made the call to try to pump all the water out of our hoses through the open window. This, of course, meant that the window couldn't close and that torrent of frosty Alaskan air just kept coming without mercy. As we were standing on top of this desk, I looked down and see a 6-plug power strip on the floor with the light still on. There it was, glowing red underwater, just waiting to inevitably fail. And due to an unfortunate experience in my childhood, the thought of being electrocuted left a really bad taste in my mouth. I think I can still taste my kidneys from that day. Don't be dumb, kids. Taking a knee on the desk, I stared at that red glow until it disappeared. I looked up at John and said, "I think I'd feel safer in Mogadishu." Murphy was alive and well that day. And after everything we'd both survived, years later we would wind up standing on this desk together, surrounded by electrically charged water. Eventually they cut the power and we got the water pumped out and everything turned out the way it should. And thank God we survived again. And you wonder why those cortisone levels are so high and most firefighters die of heart attacks. I mean, it wasn't really a super dangerous moment, but enough to get your heart going and make sure it had your attention. High pucker factor. We were all laughing about it, hanging out back at the station later on. It eventually got thawed out. Damn, that was cold. I mean, you don't truly know cold until you're that cold. Easily one of the top 2 times I actually began to think I might not make it. The other involved a dry suit and crawling through an underwater tunnel through a frozen lake soaked from the neck up. Firefighter fun. But shared suffering like that bonds people. Always has, always will. The hospital commander gave every firefighter who responded that night a coin. This coin. Same coin that John Pouch has. I had a great chat with fellow Fire Chief Pat Pippin. You might remember him from our Paracord 101 countdown. Piece number 91 we dedicated to Pat, the Fire Chief of Mogadishu, as he led the 91st Engineer Detachment of firefighters over there alongside Task Force Ranger at the airfield. But before what the world came to know as Black Hawk Down, there was another incident. There was a task force, Raven, and I got all this from Pat this week, actually. It's funny what you learn even decades later. But Task Force Raven was out doing mortar intervention. And they said they looked like there was a 58 out looking for mortar flares, and then what they'd call in a 60 with a sniper team. And once the team was taken out, they'd hover over the site and drop thermite on it. That was the SOP. That was how the interdiction was supposed to work. Pat said he was outside talking with some of the Rangers and saw a bird get hit. He thought it was a parachute flare at first, up north by the port. And then they got a call about a bird down and wanted to drop 2 firefighters on the crash site. The Black Hawk went down, and Pat asked for a volunteer. Without blinking, John stepped up and said, "I'm going, boss." And they loaded up all the mags the detachment had, as much medical stuff as they could get a hold of, and a couple of fire extinguishers. Pat Pippin and John Pouch moved to the airfield and boarded a UH-60 and sat there for an hour. Pat said they knew something had gone south when the crew chief started punching the roof and screaming. The mission was canceled and they didn't go. The task force commander had overflown the site and called it from the air. They were pretty pissed about not being able to go, not being able to perform their duties, try to save a life. But the reality is they probably would have been overwhelmed on the ground with Somalis. Pat said, "Ron, John never said a word. Just, I'm going, boss." There were 2 survivors that were severely burnt, but they did make it to another outside camp. Now I'm going to let you in on a very little known secret about this event in history that happens to be a very sensitive topic among veterans, Somali veterans in particular. The Battle of the Black Sea, or what has commonly come to be known as the Battle of Mogadishu, was an incredibly tough era for many of us. Although we suffered great losses that day, in the fiercest fighting since Vietnam at that time, there is a silver lining to it all that most people, even most veterans, have no clue about. We suffered tragic losses. But here's what you don't know. Then Specialist John Pouch is the reason that our casualty count was not higher. He is one of the unsung heroes of Mogadishu, treating wounded after wounded to the point of exhaustion until the last man. Mogadishu Fire Department medic John Pouch worked furiously and tirelessly until all were treated. That's a lot for any junior enlisted soldier to endure. It would be a lot for anyone to endure. There have been movies, documentaries, and many things said about the battle. And to my knowledge, this little piece of history has never come to light. And for the life of me, I can't understand why. During the Paracord 101 countdown on the road to serving 20,000 warfighters, we told you about the fire chief of Mogadishu, but we haven't told you until now is about a most deserving yet unsung hero of Mogadishu. John is one of the unsung heroes of that day. By God's will and John's hands, dozens were saved. Now I know what you might be thinking. Ron's just talking up some guy that he served with, as a lot of people do, right? There's nothing wrong with this, actually. The Bible actually tells us in Romans to outdo each other in honoring one another. But here's the irony. Wait for it. Wait for it. John and I never served together in Mogadishu. We never even met until 8 years later in 2001 at Fort Wainwright, Alaska. John was pulling the 4 to 6 alarm room shift on a cold September day, and his familiar voice roused the fire station a full hour earlier than normal, waking us for a most horrific reason. It was 9/11. I am proud to call him a brother and blessed to have served with this man. When you say your prayers tonight, don't forget to thank God for men like John Pouch. I know there's a bunch of guys from Task Force Ranger that do every day. And in honor of John, we're honoring him with the first of 13 pieces from our Moog Vets collection. John, Dark Continent is yours, buddy. And like Paul Harvey said, now you know the rest of the story. Stay tuned, because this is the first of 13 legendary people we're going to recognize this year. God bless them all. We're honored to present this first piece, Dark Continent, to our brother John, because John made the Dark Continent a little less dark that day. John, being that stellar E4 that he was, came to acquire the 91st Guidon and later presented it to Pat. Pretty special.
I know why we who have been to war yearn to reunite, not to tell stories or look at old pictures, not to weep or laugh. Comrades gather because they long to be with the people who once acted their best, who once suffered and sacrificed, who were stripped of their humanity. I did not pick these warriors. They were delivered by God and the military, but I know them in a way I know no others. I have never given anyone such trust. They were willing to guard something more precious than my life. They would have carried my reputation, the memory of me. It was a part of the bargain we all made, the reason we were all willing to die for one another. As long as I have memory, I will think of them all every day. I am sure that when I leave this world, my last thoughts will be of my family and my comrades.
We're cleared hot at this time.
Moog Vet 6, this is Smoke Jumper 7. Roger that. Next mission, time now.